This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so we have a double Parsha this week that is actually jam-packed with so many things to discuss. And we're going to go off the beaten track a little bit. As you know, I'm learning, I'm trying my best to go through Ramban as I do the weekly Parsha. And there's a lot of great things in the Ramban. Last year I shared a lot of Orach Chaims with you. So this year I'll be sharing a lot of Rambans with you. So on page 636, the Parsha of Acharei Mot, it's a double Parsha, Acharei Mot and Kedoshim. 636, Acharei Mot begins. And it says, Hashem spoke to Moshe after the death of the two sons of Aaron, when they drew close. Oh, here come the hordes. Good. Yeah. Janet had mentioned that because we were here, that's why the hundreds of people hadn't made their way here yet. So I said, yes, and now they're all coming. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. We just got started. Okay. So page 636. Good morning. Good morning. Page 636, Acharei Mot. Hashem spoke to Moshe after the death of the two sons of Aaron, when they drew close before God, Vayamutu, and they died. What did they do? Good morning, good morning. What did they do? They brought a non-commissioned, a non-commanded offering into the Holy of Holies on the first day, the consecration of the Mishkan. And therefore the response was as stark as could be, right? And it was the death of those two sons of Aaron, right? Because right from the get-go, as we've mentioned many times, Shabbos, creation, God making a space for us in his world. Mishkan, we reciprocate. We make a space for God in our world. Well, the space for God in our world is on his terms, not our terms. And therefore, on the very first day of the consecration, to bring in a non-commanded offering, let me do it, or as the Barbara Streisand, I'll do it my way, right? That doesn't work when you're in the Mishkan. That's not how it's meant to be. So Hashem spoke to Moshe after the death of Aaron and said, and speak to Aaron your brother, that he should not come at all times Ela Kodesh, into the holy, right, to the area behind the Parochen, to the Holy of Holies, only, well, the simple level of Pasuk Bet, Ki be'anan Eira Ela Kaporet, because I am there in my cloud of glory on the Kaporet. The Kaporet is the covering of the ark, which had the Keruvim, the angel-like figures on top of them. My cloud is there. That's not a place for you to go in. Our sages say, Ki be'anan, only with the cloud can you enter. What is that cloud? That is Bizot Yavo, this is how Aaron should come, and on the service of Yom Kippur. On the service of Yom Kippur, there Aaron does go into the Holy of Holies along with the incense. Now, it's got to be, you can't walk in with, you have the pan with the coals, you have the ketoret, the incense, and that must be placed on, the ketoret is placed onto the coals only once you're in the Kodesh Kadashim. The Tzedukim, those who rejected the Torah Shebal Peh, the rabbinic explanations, the Tzedukim would first do it outside and then come in with the cloud. And that is why in preparation for Yom Kippur, when the sages would be sitting with the Kohen Gadol. Now, the Kohen Gadol, certainly during the time of the second temple period, it was being run. The appointing of the position was being done by the Romans, the Assyrians, those who were in control. And therefore, people would buy their way into that honored position of being the Kohen Gadol. It would not be a very long-lasting honor, because he would have to go into the Holy of Holies with a rope around his ankle. because if he was not worthy, he would not live in there, and they had to literally pull him out. But the sages would make him swear beforehand that he would do it in the proper manner. Okay. Then we have a very strange avoda on page 638, Pasuk Zayin. Yes.
Why would the tzedukkim light like outside? Why would it do the incense outside?
That's how they understood the psukim to read, right? And I think, well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the. Well, let's think and let's offer ideas. Why? What is the different message of coming in with the cloud of incense billowing already, or coming in and then making it billow once you're inside? Right? What might be a difference between that? Right? Hashkafically, meaning what is a different message perhaps of coming in with it already on the coming in with the cloud, or coming in and then having it billow out. Yeah, Kathy.
I was just kind of thinking, just like with the cloud by day, they followed it. They didn't just move and then it moved. So if you have this billowing kind of cloud thing leading the way into this holy place to where you're supposed to be.
Oh, interesting. So you're comparing it to the clouds of glory, that we need to follow it. We're not leading it.
It needs to go before us.
It leads us. Okay.
Where is the pasuk
about that?
Incense?
Yeah, let's take a look 1 second. I think just 1 second. Just saying Aloha Machta. Just 1 second. Well, that's Pasuk Beis, yeah, but we also speak about the Malo HaMachta. 1 second. Malo Chafnav. Just 1 second. Yeah, here it is, page 640. V'lakach Malo HaMachta, the very top, and he will take a shovelful of the gachla eish, of the coals, from al mizbeach mifnei Hashem, from the altar before Hashem, umelo chafnav, and his cupped hands full of ketoret samim daka, of the finely ground incense spices, vehevi mi beit la parochet, and he'll bring it within the curtain, v'natan et haktoret ala eish lifnei Hashem, he'll place the ketoret onto the fire before Hashem, v'chisa anan hakatoret et hakaporet, and then the cloud of incense will cover that kaporet, that's the covering, asher al ha'idut, right, that's on top of the testimony, that's the tablets, the luchot, below yamut, and he will not die. So the psukim seem to be, sometimes when the psukim go off, they're taking the more literal translation, and we're taking the rabbinic, the rabbinic tradition teaching that we have. Here, the psukim seem to be pretty clearly they should do it while you are inside, right? Yeah. I'm not sure why the tzedukim go off, right? I'm not sure why they go off over here.
Yeah, it's very clear. The instructions are. Yeah. Instruction is clear.
Yeah.
That's what it seems.
Yeah.
Rabbi, you said
well, the only thing is, I'm sorry, when it says before Hashem, that can mean in the holy or in the holy of holies. Whereas they would say do it in the holy and then enter. But to me, it seems more to indicate, right, it's all being done in the holy of holies. Yes, Rachel.
It kind of dawned on me when you said hashkafically, it's kind of like what's the cause, what's the effect. So if you're doing it outside, it's like kochi v'semyodi, right? Like it's like I'm doing this, I'm lighting the fire, I created the cloud, versus like when you go in, it's Hashem. It's clearly Hashem who created the incense. Okay.
I hear that, right? Another thought that I was entertaining is I'm coming in, right, in a similar vein. I'm coming in, right, it's done already. Here I am, right? What you see is what you get, right? Right? As opposed to on Yom Kippur, which is when this service is being done, we have to be focusing that we're constantly moving. We're constantly doing more. We come before Hashem and we try to improve ourselves. We need to constantly be changing ourselves. I'm not coming in as a done deal. I'm not a finished product. I am a work in progress. Perhaps.
I think that if you wanted to argue the other position, you could argue, I've prepared. I come in, I'm already prepared, and I've demonstrated that I'm doing it. I'm not like waiting till I get inside to then decide that I'm doing it. So I think it depends like what you're looking for.
Where we want to get to.
Yeah.
I hear that.
It shows a lot of zeal. Maybe.
Yeah.
But that was the problem with the sons of Aaron. They were
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Right? That was the problem with the sons of Aaron. So therefore, we've got to make sure that we are not. Yeah. Interesting.
Hashem's will.
That is a good point.
Just a second. Or actually, maybe right, taking what you said, Judy. That I would think like this, but this is how it says to do it. Right? I might have thought like that, but the whole point is don't replay. Like combine what the two of you are saying. Don't replay the sons of Aaron. Do it as stated. Yes, Janet.
And earlier in early Parsha, isn't part of the Ketoret rising and the burning of it, with to partially not see so much of Hashem's glory on the cover, that you don't get overwhelmed and only the interaction that's appropriate.
I don't know if it's that. I never looked at it like that. I looked at it more like that we want to be part, let's say by Har Sinai, we were told not to climb that mountain, right? Not to get close to that mountain, right? I always think of Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that movie from a long time ago, and that people were drawn to the mountain, right? Ooh, right? They were drawn to that mountain, and that has real Sinai echoes, right? Of being drawn to that. So Nadav and Avihu were drawn to this cloud of Hashem. I want to be part of that cloud, right? I don't know if it's to obfuscate or if it's to become one with, to join together with. Okay, but I wanted to look at, because the Ramban has a whole piece over here, at the 638. You'll take these two he-goats, and bring and have them stand there before Hashem by the entrance of the Ohel Moed, of the tent of covenant. And then he's going to draw lots and place these lots onto the two seirim. Goral echad laHashem, the goral echad laZazel. One of them will be laHashem. The other one will be laAzazel. How does English say it? One lot for Hashem and one lot for Azazel. Thank you very much. Right? Rashi says Azazel is Har Az Vikasheh, Sok Gavoa. It is a hard mountain, like a rocky mountain. Sok Gavoa, a high cliff. That's how he defines Azazel. So he's going to draw two lots, right? And then one will be LaHashem, one will be LaZazel, and then Pasuk 9, and Aaron is going to offer the Seir, which was the Goral LaHashem, Vasau Chatat, right? That is going to be a Chatat, a sin offering, and the Seir, the goat, upon which the Goral, the lot that should go LaZazel, that will be stand alive before God, and then it'll be sent out to the midbar, and it will go off the cliff. Those are the two seirim. So it's interesting. These two seirim were two identical seirim. One was shechted, and the other one was sent out. When else did we very recently have this idea of two identicals, one being shechted, the other being sent out? We didn't discuss it, but it was in last week's Parsha by the
woman giving birth afterwards. The
no,
two turtle doves.
no, they're both going to be sacrificed. But
I thought one is dipped in the blood and then sent away.
by the purification of the mitzorah, of the person with tzara'at, that leprosy-like spiritual affliction, we'll call it. And there, one of them is shechted, and the blood goes into a vessel with water in it, and the other bird is dipped in that and then is sent out, right? And Rav Hirsch has a very beautiful piece over here, that you have these two identical goats, you have these two identical birds, meaning that we all start off with this very, very clean slate, and then the directions, the paths that we take can be tremendously disparate. But everyone starts off the same way, and when I say the same way, of course, everyone has certain abilities or certain challenges, right? But everyone starts off with that clean slate of exactly what they need in order to go forward in life and to accomplish what we're meant to accomplish in life, and then everyone chooses their paths. But Ramban goes into over here, what is this Azazel? And the Even Ezra writes in a very interesting manner, right? He says, even though the seir, the chatat, the goat that is la Hashem, also the seir hamishtaleach is to Hashem, right? And if you could understand this, you'll understand much, and I'll tell it to you when you will be ben shloshim v'shalosh. When you're 33, that's when I'll tell it to you. So he's writing it he's writing something very, very cryptically. So the Ramban says as follows: Azazel is, right? Well, in modern Hebrew, tell someone to go Lazazel, you're telling them to go down a few levels into the earth, right? Azazel, he says, actually, well, he says as follows. He says the Even Ezra tried to hide it. I'm going to be a rochel. I'm going to be the one who spills the beans. And he says the way to understand it is look 33 psukim up ahead. 33 psukim up ahead, and there we have page 646. We just had the prohibition against offering any sacrifices outside of the Mishkan or outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Verse Hey, Pasuk Hey, verse 5. Laman asher yaviu b'nei Yisroel et zivchehem, in order that the children of Israel will bring their offerings, asher heim zovchim, that they offer, al pnei asadeh, out on the fields, vehevi'am, and they will bring them la Hashem, right? They're bringing to Hashem. So I go 2 psukim ahead. Zion 7. Below yizbechu od azivchehem l'seirim asherhem zonim achareihem. They should not bring their offerings anymore. Rashi says, as we had learned in Egypt, to the seirim asherhem zonim achareihem. Right? To the seirim, to the demons after whom they stray. So, Rambam deals with this less. Ramban deals with this a lot more. Right? Ramchal deals with this. There are these spiritual beings called Shadim, which are spiritual beings, like a neshama is a spiritual being destined to join up with a physical body, and we partner with our neshama. There are spiritual beings and spiritual forces that are not meant to join up with a physical body at any point. And there are malachim and there are shadim. There's this whole spiritual realm that exists. And these are forces. Avodah Zarah, idolatry, went off the tracks when they viewed these forces as having independent strength and ability. So let me deal with that. Let me bring offerings to that to curry its favor, so it will work work on my behalf. But we are commanded absolutely not to deal with them. We have to recognize and accept that Hashem is the one. But the way the Ramban explains it over here is Hashem is telling us, in this case, to send out the Seh Lazazel. And he compares it to someone who's making a Seudah, a lavish feast for the Adon, for the master. And the Adon commands the person making the Seudah, I want you to give a nice portion to that person. Give that guy a nice portion. So the person making the Seudah, he's not making the Seudah, the feast, for that person. He's doing it for the king who told him to make this Seudah. Everything is given to the master, and the master is directing him to give something over there. And he says, right, and that's why we have the lot system, right? In which case, I'm not designating anything, right? God, you're telling me to do it? I'll do it. I'm not designating anything for Lazazel. I'm doing what you told me to do, drawing 2 lots. This one is LaHashem, de facto, and actually the halacha is he proclaims this one is LaHashem. He doesn't proclaim anything about the other one. It is by virtue, process of elimination, that will be Lazazel, and that gets sent out. So Ramban says that this is an avoda that we do to Hashem, that on Yom Kippur, so to speak, it's hard to say these words, to appease that Azazel, to appease those demons, so we give them something over there, right? But we're doing this as avodas Hashem. Now, elsewhere, this word Azazel is a fascinating word. And because these are the forces of Ra, the forces of evil that Hashem puts into the world in order to give us our challenges, in order that we can self-actualize. But look at the word Azazel. The first Az, Ayin Zayin, is strength.
Mm-hmm.
Hashem Oz la'amo yitain, Hashem yivarech, right? Aziv zimras ka, vayhili yeshua, right? We say in the Az Yashir. Az means strength. Azal is to go. So its name is strength goes, strength leaves, strength ebbs. And that goes back to the concept we've mentioned a number of times, that the Yetzer Hara, probably more in our Chovos HaVavos class, but the Yetzer Hara, its job is to push us and then to bow out. Azal. It's there to challenge us, and then its strength goes. And the beautiful example that's always brought is when Yaakov was wrestling with the angel. The angel was a messenger of God. So how did Yaakov win? Right? If its mission was to fight with Yaakov, how could it lose? It must be his mission was to fight and lose. That was its mission. That is the Azazel. That's also a beautiful explanation that's said in the very beginning of the Torah, after Cain killed Hevel. Let's just find those psukim. Give me 1 second, please. Go to page 20. Verse 7. Hashem tells Cain, verse 7, Pasuk Zayin, Halo im tetiv se'et. If you improve yourself, you will be lifted up. Vim lo tetev, but if you will not improve yourself, lepetach chatat rovetz. Sin will be crouching, resting at the door. Ve'elecha teshukato, and to you is its desire. V'ata timshol bo, yet, English, yet you can conquer it. That's how it's usually understood. But another way of reading the last words is Ve'elecha teshukato v'ata timshol bo. Its desire is for you, not yet, but that. Its desire is for you that you shall rule over it. Meaning it wants to get beaten. That is the role of this Yetzer Hara. That is the role of the Azazel. That it's Azal. That its strength will dissipate.
I'm just thinking, so would you say that two are synonyms, like Azazel and the Yetzer Hara?
To a degree, yeah. According to the way this Ramban, the Azazel are these forces of Ra in the world. All right, they're out in the desert, the place of desolation. That's what they cause. And we have this God tells us, this chok, that to offer this out over there. Let's go to the end of the Parsha. Let's go to page 654. The end of the Parsha dealt with all of the forbidden incest relationships, the forbidden sexual relationships that are considered to be incest. Look at verse 24, the top of 654. Al titamu bichol eile. Do not become tamei, impure, right? Through all of this. Ki bichol eile, it was with all of these forbidden sexual relationships. Nitmu hagoyim, the nations became tamei, impure. Those that I'm sending out from before you. Vatitma haaretz, the land became tamei. Ve'efkod avona, I recalled its sins. Vatakia aretz et yoshveha, and the land disgorged, literally means vomited, its inhabitants. Right? And therefore, shmartem atem, you got to keep these chukim mishpatim. Do not follow in the ways of these abominations of the nations. Right? Below, jump to 28. Below takia aretz etchem, that the land will not vomit you out if you were to defile it. Kasher ka'a, as it disgorged, will be a little more gentle. Et hagoy, the nation, asher lefnechem, that was before you. And Ramban over here also gives us a tremendous yesod, because he asks, there are certain mitzvot that are land dependent, and other mitzvot that are person dependent. Typically, the mitzvot that are person dependent apply no matter where you are. Those that are land dependent apply to the land of Israel and not outside the land of Israel. But these arayot, these forbidden sexual relationships, that's not land related, that is person related. So why does it have that effect on the land? Why is it suddenly becoming land related? And he says something which is a yesod, a principle. And again, Ramban deals a lot with this spiritual heavenly realm. And he says that there are nations, every nation has its ministering angel, the spiritual force in the heavens that deals with it. Okay? And that's why when it says, let's say, V'hinei Mitzrayim noseya achareihem, it says in the singular, Egypt was chasing after us. It doesn't say the Egyptians were. Egypt was in the singular. So either we say a whole nation is said in the singular, or it means their malach, their spiritual entity that needs to be dealt with. See, he says that every land has its malach that deals with it, except for the land of Israel. And Sa'ut HaYishuv hi nachalat Hashem miyuchedet lishmo. Israel, God does not have a proxy. God does not have a spiritual governor over there. Rather, lo natan aleh min malachim. He did not place over it any intermediary force. As it says, you will be a segula, you will be a treasure to me from amongst all the nations, because for me is all the land, and I will be for you as a God. Meaning that the land of Israel has this special direct connection with Hashem. I think people often feel that you go to Israel, you're davening over there. It's a different sort of davening. Famously, when David HaMelech, not yet King David, when David was being pursued by Shaul, and David had two instances where he easily could have taken Shaul's life, and he did not. One was Shaul went into the cave to take care of his bodily needs. David was there, cut off a corner of his garment, and then held it up and said, look, here's your garment. I could have taken your life, but you see, I revere you, I respect you, you are the king. I mean no harm to you. Why are you believing those who were slandering me and saying? And then another time, David went into the camp where Shaul, and he took his personal jug, right, to show, look, I was right there, and right. So David, when he is lambasting Shaul over this, he says to him, and you forced me to serve other gods. Right? What do you mean you forced me to serve other gods? Where do we find that? So Ramban and others explain, you forced me out of the land of Israel. I had to run for my life out of the land of Israel. Once I'm out of the land of Israel, I'm serving other gods. Why? Well, Avodah Zarah, idolatry at its core, is serving God through a proxy. It says, davening to Hashem outside of Israel needs to go through these different channels. And therefore, it's, for someone on King David's level, it is Avodah Zarah like. So that's why he says that is the special quality of the land of Israel. And that's why it cannot handle this tum'ah, this impurity, even though this is not a land-related din, a land-related halacha. but this is a person to person, a person, a guf. It's mitzvah taguf. It's the mitzvah that apply to the person. Nevertheless, there is this special sensitivity in the land of Israel that does not exist elsewhere. And with that, he explains another interesting issue that we find in Tanakh, and that is when Sancheriv took over the land of Israel, conquered, he would move nations around, and he sent the Kutim, a nation called the Kutim, into the land of Israel, and they were doing their service of idolatry there as they had done, and suddenly there are these lion attacks. And they asked the Kohanim, some Jews who remained there, what's going on? And they were told, look, what you can do in your land is one thing, but the land of Israel has this heightened sensitivity bar over here. And that which is okay elsewhere is not okay over here.
I think that if we, the case of Sodom and Gomorrah is a case in point, because that wasn't the land. It wasn't the land of Israel, and they were committing sexual misdeeds and were destroyed for it.
Yes. So that had reached a certain point, right? But it's interesting because let's say by the flood, we're told that the land was filled with sexual deviation and with stealing from one another, and the decree of the flood was because of the Bein Adam Lechavero, not the Bein Adam Lemakom. And Sodom and Gomorrah also, I think their main sin was the way they were treating one another, right? And that is where the destruction came. And Rashi says this very clearly, that the same parsha of Noach and the flood, at the end we have the Tower of Babel. There they were rebelling against God, and what happens? They get scattered. They stay alive. But Noach, where the main thing was Kimalah Aretz Hamas, because the land was filled with Hamas, interesting word, huh? With Hamas, which is thievery and violence, that's why the destruction came. But in Israel, there we have this extra sensitivity. Then the Rambam. Yes.
So you mentioned that these acts render people tamei, but I, like Jenny has mentioned, I always thought, tamei, you can maybe go purify yourself through the waters of the red heifer, or you can go to the mikveh and go outside the camp and then wash your clothes. But I always thought these particular mishpatim were much more severe, and the penalty was much more severe.
So this has the severity of the land. That's what the pasuk says in 24, 25. It makes the land tamei. Okay?
And watch lest you become, you said lest the people become tamei as well, remember?
And that will make the land tamei. Yes.
Right. But the general, I guess I'm focused on the general use of the word tamei. Usually tamei has, like we were learning from Metzora and earlier.
Okay. It depends. There are different types of tumah, right? Going to a mikvah after doing something like this, or the red heifer after this, does not take off the tumah, right? In other words, there are different types of tumah. This is not a tumah where the Torah says, and this is how, right? You will be tamei until the evening and then immerse in water, right? This is a different type of tumah that permeates. Then the Ramban says, again on page 654, Ki kol asher yaseh, whoever does from these toevot, from these abominations, the nichritu nefashot osot mikerav amam, right? They will be cut off from among their people. Before the Ramban, I do want to just make a side point. We live in a world where at least American society a little less now under this administration than previous administrations. But homosexuality is perfectly fine, right? According to the Torah, right? It's not the inclination. A person might have an inclination and not have another and not find it and not find any interest otherwise, right? It's acting on it. But very often, I've said often that I certainly can't judge someone that if I were to wake up in the morning and get a bulletin from the OU and from YU and from all my Rabbeim, we just realized that I'm sorry, you and your wife, that's an abomination, and you've got to find yourself a nice guy, right? Right, according to the Torah. Right? I don't know what I would do with that. I don't know what I would do with that. So I'm not going to. Someone who finds a heterosexual relationship as distasteful as a heterosexual views a homosexual relationship, right? I'm certainly I'm not going to judge such a person, and why Hashem gave them that challenge, right? Which is the greatest of challenges. I think at our core, everyone wants to have an intimate relationship with another person, right? So why God gave that person that challenge, I don't know. But something that bothers me is that very often people will say, no, that's really, really terrible, right? Because the Torah calls that a toeva. Toeva means like an abomination, right? And therefore, right, what troubles me is when people take their innate bias and say that's the Torah. The Torah is saying that. But really, right, and my response when I hear that from someone is, the Torah also calls distortion of weights, meaning distortion of business practices. It also calls that a toeva.
What about gluttony? What about all of us that have got a few pounds extra? Is that really?
Right, but the Torah doesn't call that a toeva.
It doesn't?
It doesn't call a little extra weight. But it doesn't.
I thought gluttony was part of the deadly sin, or the seven.
Not Jewish stuff.
I'm not sure.
Okay. Maybe I'm
right.
Sorry.
But there are other things that the Torah calls toeva. So we shouldn't take our own bias and say, oh, that's the Torah that is making that bias. Hello, Mr. Ken. How are you? Good to see you. Right? Okay. But the Ramban has an incredible piece over here on verse 29. Anyone commits these abominations, people doing so will be cut off from among their people. And the Ramban writes as follows. Often the question is asked, why doesn't the Torah speak about the world to come? Why doesn't the Torah speak about the world to come? So there are places that it sort of alludes to it, right? Well, so one answer given is, well, it's easy to say, this is what's going to happen to you. But the Torah speaks about what's going to happen here on earth, right? Not what will be, right? Or I mentioned yesterday in another class we had that whenever the Torah mentions a person dying, it says he's gathered to his people and then he is buried. So the gathering to the people can't mean being buried in the family burial area, because then the order would be he'd be buried and then gathered to his people. If we say gathered to his people, so that's explained that first the person crosses the Gesher Achayim, the bridge of life, and is met by those who preceded them to that spot, and then the body is buried. But the Ramban says on this pasuk as follows: V'teida v'taskil, no one understands. Ki akritut haniskeret b'nefesh, when we speak about a cutting off of the soul, The souls will be cut off. That is bitachon gadol. That shows us with great surety how the nefesh, how the soul is kiyum, is alive, is continues after the mita, after the death of the body. And that speaks to the reward that is given in the world of the souls. Because if it says that this soul will be cut off from before me, that means that those who do the sin will be cut off. But the others, Bashar Nefashot, Asher Lo Chatu, who did not sin, they will be Kayamot Lefanav. They will not be cut off from before me, meaning they will be there before God. Beziv Ha'elyon, in the glow of that which is above. The Tam, and understand, Ki Nishmat Ha'adam Ner Hashem. The soul of a person is the candle of God. Asher Nufcha Ba'apeinu, that was blown into us, Mipi Elyon, from above. The Nishmat Shakai, it's the soul, it's the breath of God. As it says in Bereishit, that God blew into his nostrils the neshama of life. And therefore, if that's what it is, lo tamut, that which is from the spiritual realm, from the breath of God, that will never die. It's not as we are a combination of the different elements that at a certain point separates, and then we have our death. And therefore, lo yistarecha katav lomar. It does not need to say that in the merit of the mitzvot it will exist. That's obvious it will exist. It's a part of God. Of course it's going to exist. But what does it need to say? Oh, so that's the natural state. The natural state is that the neshama will, of course, it's spiritual, it's from God. Of course that's eternal. What does it need to say? Oh, there's a way to take away that natural state. There are certain averot which can cause a dirtying, the tikaret, and it will cut it off minakiyum hara'oi, from this existence that inherently, intrinsically, it was meant to have. And that's why we use the term karet, cutting off, like a branch that's cut off from the tree. The branch is getting its sustenance, its life from the tree. You cut off the branch, then it's going to die. And that's why it always speaks about the karet of the nefesh. Fascinating. Yeah. You know, he references elsewhere at the end of Shmos, where he says, if you make a calculation, when Moshe's mother gave birth to him, she was a lot older than Sarah was when she gave birth to Yitzchak. So why is a big deal made out of Yitzchak's birth and no mention of the age of Yocheved when she gave birth to Moshe? And he explains that the Torah is only going to make a big deal out of something when it was predicted is going to happen. He says everything is miraculous, right? A woman 20 giving birth, a woman 120 giving birth. It's all miraculous. The Torah is going to emphasize the haftachot or the hatraot, right, when it was warned not to or guaranteed that it would, right? And therefore, the Torah mentions over here karet because that is a break from the natural. That is nisi. That is beyond the normal and will not guarantee the kiyum, the continued life and sustenance, shuhu ra'oi, that is natural, that a soul will continue on. I found that to be a fascinating Ramban when I saw that this week.
So there are certain sins there are other sins besides
The sexual sins.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
That can cause that.
Idolatry, as opposed to idolatry.
Idolatry, yeah. Actually, there are 36. Now, many of the choruses are when it comes to the sexual sins, right? Because that really gets to the core of what a person is, and we're supposed to be here to continue ourselves and our existence and our species in a healthy manner. Yes, but there are many others.
But is there a way
So-
to heal that if you've done whatever?
Okay, yes.
Because that's, if not, most of the population might as well just end it right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Then there's no hope
Yes.
because you've done something.
Yes. So there is teshuva, for kares. Whereas if a person did something for which there is a capital punishment, the only way the capital punishment is part and parcel of that person's atonement. And that way the person then, right, can carry on into the next world, right? If you do teshuva, right, you murdered someone, chas v'shalom, and there's capital punishment. You do a complete teshuva, great. That's what a person needs to do along with the capital punishment. Kares, there, the teshuva alone can cleanse that, can remedy that.
So with capital punishment, a lot of times that's the appropriate punishment, but it's not going to happen because you don't have the witnesses and all that stuff. So if it doesn't happen because of those technicalities, does that mean you cannot?
That's a great question. And what would seem to me is if the divine orchestration, Ashkacha Pratis, created a situation where you can't get that, then that means that is not what is fully needed for your teshuva. That's how I would look at it. Am I right or wrong? I don't know. Right? But that's how I would like to look at it. If the divine orchestration made it that the Beit Din, for whatever reason, technical or whatever it might be, is unable to give that capital punishment, then that's an indication that capital punishment is not needed, right? And this idea, maybe we'll spend a few minutes on this. This idea, the Torah never gives punishments. The Torah gives remedies, right? Meaning any onesh that the Torah gives, that's there as a kapara, as an atonement for the person. The capital punishment, the person says vidui beforehand, and the person makes kiddush beforehand, right? And we say to him lamita, towards death. And that's why we have a custom when a person has a drink, what do we say to them? L'chaim, right? To life, right? It's there as a means of atonement. And that's why that's used to explain some strange Torah laws that we have, right? One of them is in Kedoshim, one of them is elsewhere, that if witnesses testified about someone trying to give that person a death penalty, and in fact they were not there, they were elsewhere at the time, before this person is executed, if based on their testimony there is a gemar din, a final verdict, and then witnesses come along and say, hey, how do you guys testify that you were with us? Then what happens? They get whatever penalty they try to give, they get, even a death penalty. But let's say the Beit Din acted on their testimony already. And then the witness will come and say, hey, you guys were with us at the time. There they don't get the death penalty. Kasher zaman v'lo kasher asa. We learn out. Seems crazy. If the people who tried to get the guy killed didn't get killed, the people who successfully got him killed, of course they should get him killed. But one of the explanations that's given is, if you tried, the Beit Din says, oh, our toolkit can help you. Capital punishment will help you. If you got the person killed, we can't help you. Sorry, right? And this is just going to be in God's hands. We have later on in Kedoshim, we had again in Kedoshim, this idolatry, according to Moses, considered to be an idolatry called Molech, where a person would carry their child or had their child walk through these pillars of fire, right, getting burnt along the way, right, and very often leading to the death of that child as an offering to this Molech god. The pasuk says if a person brings mizaro of their children to Molech, there's capital punishment for that. We learn out mizaro from his children, but not all of his children. If a person does all of his children to Molech, then we don't give this capital punishment. What do you mean? Right? But again, it's the same idea. A person can do something that is so beyond that the Beit Din says it's not in our toolkit. Right? We can't help you. Sorry. And that's between you and God. But every onesh that comes along the way is there as a remedy, as a cleansing. I was just talking with Natalie on the way home on Shabbos. There's a strange teaching that if you speak lashon hara about someone else, you get that person's sins and they get your mitzvot. I don't think it means they get all of it, right? But there is a transfer that takes place. Strange teaching. And we were discussing, like, how is that just? Like, why is that just? Right? God is tzedek. God is just. Right? Why would that be just? And a thought that we had was, when I speak badly about someone, what am I doing? I am highlighting a negative about that person. So therefore, what happens? I'm going to see.
Lashon hara isn't necessarily only highlighting a negative.
Well, speaking derogatorily about someone.
So even I thought lashon hara includes like speaking well about people. It's just speaking about other people.
No, lashon tov is something that we should be doing.
Okay, so you discussed it last week.
Yes.
And you said like over.
Yes, that would be right.
So I mean, there are.
Okay, but in those cases where I'm speaking overly effusively about someone, why am I doing that? Because in the back of my mind, I know that's going to spur others to speak lashon hara and to highlight, right? But it always comes back to either my highlighting or my egging on others in a very, very sophisticated manner. I spoke nicely about the person, but basically I'm egging on others to highlight that person's negative. I think,
Rabbi, in
1 second, Janet, I think at the core, lashon hara is highlighting someone else's negative. So therefore, what will come back to me? I will have negatives about me highlighted. But 1 second, those aren't my negatives. But I think it'll be clear that yes, those are my negatives because I spoke that lashon hara. So depending on how egregious the negative that I highlighted, that's how egregious my lashon hara is, and therefore I'm going to get a sense of feeling. What's it like to have my negatives highlighted and my positives ignored, off the table? So perhaps that is the tzedek involved, that I get their negative and they get my positive. I get to experience what it's like to have negatives focused on and positives ignored, right? And perhaps that is but that speaks to the idea that we said before, that every onesh is not simply punitive. Every onesh is to bring about that deep realization of what I've done and to go through a serious introspection of how wrong that was, and that is what purifies myself. So the onesh is not punitive. It's there to help me recognize the things that I've done wrong. Yes, Janet.
So it is risky, but sometimes you're not in the back of your mind. You're eliciting this other poor experience from the other people of the group. Sometimes you may have really had a truly excellent, sterling experience with someone, and you might be
But you
trying to
have
help
to,
them
yes, but we have to have a
temper.
filter. Janet, we need a filter. And I might have had a wonderful experience, but I know who I'm talking to. I need to know who I'm talking to, and I have to have that filter. And even though I might want to say what a wonderful experience was, if I know or if I could know that the people around me have negative feelings, then I have to be careful who I share that sterling experience with or the manner in which I share it. That's on me. That's on me. And the fact that I had a sterling experience doesn't give me carte blanche to spew about that in a manner that might incite others to bring up negativism.
Okay, I'm just thinking maybe your experience could help them temper and give a person another chance.
Maybe it could, but you have to do that carefully. That not in a way that is going to, like I said, incite. Yes, right. Certainly, if someone has a negative view, I had a certain teacher of mine who was very, very rough on me and my friends and left a very, very, very negative impression. And I appreciated hearing years ago from my brother Lava Shalom that there was someone, a friend of his, who says that this particular teacher helped him tremendously by being so firm and strict. So I appreciated hearing that okay, the guy is not right, with all the havoc that he caused to me and my friends, there were those who gained from it. I was happy to hear that, right? But you have to be selective in how, right? Filter is so crucial. To whom and how, and we have to be very, very careful with right. Words are what make us uniquely human. That we have back in Bereshit. Hashem made us into a nefesh chaya. The Targum says nefesh mamadala, a person with the ability to speak. That is a godly aspect. But we have to be so careful to guard that godly aspect and to make sure it's being used in a way that builds and not in a way that destroys. Yeah. Okay, my friends, we'll call it over here. Should call off to all those here in person. Thank you. Yes,
Can I
Judith.
ask you a question not related to
Yes.
any of this? So, it's not related to any of this. It's
Okay.
about the Israel fair.
Okay.
So the
So let me stop with the recording.